hey, have you planned your exit strategy before they even start their business?
Mergers and acquisitions and private equity investments in India are on a
Number
rise.
one is going to have more and more issues because of the rapid nature in which products are being commoditized and technology is being commoditized. So then how do you differentiate? How can a potential acquirer actually see why your stuff is more distinctive than what they can already replicate? D2C founders are going to be really upset with me when I say, hey, have you planned your exit strategy before they even start their business? They've got these dreams of selling a lot of wonderful makeup or t-shirts or whatever, but they haven't really considered whom they're going to get acquired by. They'll get irritated with me because they're very passionate about their business and they don't want to really think about stopping their business before even starting it. But a lot of people are going to benefit from this question, not only because it allows them to visualize the end state, but it also allows them to focus on the present moment, right? So there's only one thing though that D2C founders must do when they're thinking about this kind of visualization or strategy is how should their story look like to their potential acquirer?
So, before we start with the story, let's take a step back. Let's look at some facts. HUL acquired the skincare brand Minimalist with a 90% stake for almost 3,000 crores. Aditya Birla Group's House of Brands acquired a 82% stake in Bewakoof for 200 crores. Look at examples of companies like Nykaa acquiring Dot and Key, brands like Country Delight and Licious, they're receiving a huge M&A interest. So, this brings us to a definitive trend that the mergers and acquisitions and private equity investments in India are on a rise. In 2025's first quarter, they hit a 3-year high of approximately $4 billion. Now, let's look at the trends of what acquirers are looking for, what kind of companies acquirers are acquiring, right? So they're targeting brands with a very strong digital DNA, a very robust e-commerce operations, and a very, very strong community around them. Now, if you look at companies like Bewakoof and Dot and Key, they've built passionate communities, a very high repeat purchase rates. Minimalist had already made itself known as a clinically proven skincare brand with a fair amount of consumer interest in their products. So acquirers, they didn't have to build a brand from scratch and use their own brand equity to sell their product. In fact, the acquired brand's equity helped these big acquirers with their sales and profits. Now, acquisitions are happening in brands that have disrupted the traditional categories, which makes sense because acquirers aren't buying out brands to reduce their competition anymore like they did 20, 30 years back. They're acquiring to enhance their own portfolio, enter market segments in which they don't have any presence yet, and most importantly, tap into the digitally native audiences. So I'll say for the brands wishing to get acquired, they need to showcase their stories, showcase themselves as disruptive. It might be the product, it might be the technology that becomes the differentiator, or it might be their brand story that positions them as disruptive for at least the next 5 years to come.
Janavi, this is very interesting. All the trends that you've spoken of and the underlying facts around them make me feel that there are two routes to market for these kind of people who are exiting. The one route is towards technology and product differentiation, and the second one is towards community storytelling and the rest of it. And I think route number one is going to have more and more issues because of the rapid nature in which products are being commoditized and technology is being commoditized. So then how do you differentiate? How can a potential acquirer actually see why your stuff is more distinctive than what they can already replicate? So it's the typical build versus buy thing that happens.
Yeah.
In this case, if I'm looking at the second option, the storytelling option, that is probably going to go below the radar, but its effects will be seen in the longer term. And this is where your real strong nature of storytelling comes into being. And what I wanted to probably focus on was, okay, so you've got an ability to understand that, okay, this is really important for me, I need to get acquired at some stage, so that perhaps might end up being my north star. Then what I think the next step would be is to convert that understanding into a very clear blueprint of who your acquirer is going to be. So that is where I would like to actually start off our conversation. Who is the acquirer? And if I look at the way in which a lot of companies in Silicon Valley have looked at this, they have potentially kind of said, okay, Google is going to acquire me, Amazon is going to acquire me, and stuff like that. The best example would be Goodreads, which is a wonderful reading community which was acquired by Amazon, and Google has acquired so many other companies. But Goodreads is great because it actually is about storytelling and storytellers, so it actually lends itself to our argument. What do you think?
If you look at the companies that start looking for acquirers or looking for investments or mergers, these are companies who have generally reached a threshold where they've realized, okay, their profitability is no longer scalable or their ops are no longer scalable. Companies might not start with a dream of getting acquired by a bigger company, right? So in such a scenario, if you're already a very big player, then you automatically become a threat to a bigger company.
Hmm.
The bigger company won't just be acquiring you, they'll be beating you, and it'll be much easier for them to beat you. An HUL might find it extremely easy to beat a Mintra or a Nykaa, but to become a company that a bigger brand acquires, you need to put your story out there before you become a big enough threat, right? Because see, these are industry veterans. They have been working in the industry for the last 20, 30 years. The moment they see your product line, the moment they see your vision, they can understand if you're full of fluff or if you have something that will give them 10x 20x kind of returns. So all you need to do is communicate your story properly, communicate your north star and vision properly, and communicate that I have all of this solid infrastructure backing to reach that kind of stage. That, boss, all I'm lacking is the capital. If you can bring in the capital, I already have the positioning and the story to give you the 10x kind of results that you're looking for.
So the first thing is that I think that a lot of people go about it from the way in which you looked at things, the process. But what typically becomes a problem is if you see the trends that you might have seen, you should see when did the acquisition happen, and was it really 5 years or 10 years, or was it like 1 year or 2 years? Because the time has been crunched in terms of the acquisition. The second thing is, if you are going to give a story of okay, you got the muscle, you've got the financial distribution, and I've got the brand and the community, and now let's get married or something like that, it becomes a bit of a distress sale. Because what a bigger player is going to actually look at is, okay, you know what, this guy is desperate to sell. What you're communicating is desperation to sell. I think that the bigger players basically got a slap on their face when they actually faced Baba Ramdev and Patanjali, right? When Baba Ramdev and Patanjali actually built that brand, which came from nowhere, I think they have understood that playbook, which they don't really understand or they don't really get. But they know that there'll be these emerging players in the marketplace that they need to keep an eye out. They obviously understand that it is going to be a commoditized market and blah 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 and all of that, and this can continue its merry path. What is really critical is for the acquiree to understand whether I want to get acquired, and if I want to get acquired, then let's not look at it as a distress sale. Let's say, okay, these are the two people who are going to buy me out or whatever. So why should my story make sense to them?
Hmm.
So now in this case, why my story makes sense to them is not because, funnily enough, not because we think like each other, right? But it is actually because I don't think like you, right? So the value system and the differentiator are two different things. So your value systems have to be the same or similar if you're going to get acquired, otherwise it will be an unhappy marriage. But if I look at why I'm buying you because I don't have you. Okay, I don't have you.
Yeah.
So there's no point in replicating strength. So I need to understand, so how is my story going to actually differentiate itself from what their story is, to a large extent, and build a community around it.
I agree about the product extensions, but I am doubtful about the story. Shouldn't the story arcs might be an extension of the story arc of the bigger brand?
No, no, it's worthy considering both possibilities. So I'm not saying that it shouldn't be an extension, but the moment it becomes too much of an extension, the bigger brand is going to think, okay, if I invest a little more in just extending whatever lux I've got or whatever, it's going to just this is okay. I can just compete with this person. So I need to get out of that compete space into the collaborate space in my own head as a potential acquirer. And for that, I need to understand that whatever this guy is doing, I cannot do. So the moment I look at brand extensions, okay, I'm going back into product territory. If you fight in product territory with a bigger brand, you're always going to lose. What is actually going to work is, okay, I've got a community boss, and all birds is my community, and that's why I've got these wonderful pair of shoes, or Neiman's is wonderful pair of shoes, which is on Instagram or whatever the hell. and then you got a community and a story around it, which they are going to find really difficult, because then it's David versus Goliath. And when it's David versus Goliath, David always wins.
Whenever the D2C brands, they look to get acquired or they start by getting acquired, they always begin with, okay, this product will be a differentiator in the market, or this could be a good plug and play with a bigger acquirer's brand portfolio. So the entire emphasis comes to products rather than the story or the brand positioning or the brand building.
No,
Yeah, I think
absolutely.
this is one question that even I had when we were thinking of about this topic, right? If I'm a brand that wants to get acquired or is starting off with a goal of getting acquired, why is brand building or why is story building so important for me if the product is the only thing that's going to get acquired?
See, your shampoo or t-shirt has to be good. That's table stakes,
Yeah.
right? Otherwise, your consumers are going to reject you. Your technology, your digital presence, and all has to be there. Otherwise, you're not going to find distribution even for your own business. So these are what I call hygiene factors, and these have to be there. But I cannot compete on product. I cannot compete on technology. I cannot compete just by awareness. I have to move it to a place wherein the more niche I make it, okay, the more non-scalable I make it, the more attractive I become, right? And that is totally connected to the storytelling aspect. Stories are meaning making inside your head, right, inside the consumer's head. And the moment you're starting to create meaning that your acquirer cannot, that is where you're winning.
So basically, I, as a smaller company or a D2C company, I come with a certain set of brand values that my customer will resonate with. And
Mhm.
that value gets acquired by a bigger company that lends me its distribution channel or its, large scale visibility.
That's right. In fact, the lesser the value of the product itself is, and the more comparable it is to other products like T-shirts. Let's take T-shirts as a classic example. Very easy to make T-shirts, right?
Yeah.
So the moment you are saying this, there is no pull which goes beyond the T-shirt or beyond the shampoo or beyond whatever. And so therefore, there are some categories which are even more susceptible towards product undifferentiation or whatever, lack of distinctiveness and the rest of it. They should certainly be looking at how do I invade a person's mind and occupy a place over there in a way that goes beyond whatever I'm selling physically.
Look at technologies like WhatsApp and all that got acquired by the bigger companies. Now you don't see that anymore. You don't see the acquisitions that are happening are more of minimalist kind of brands that are disruptive to a certain degree, but not category disruptive or not revolutionary disruptive.
The
So
only exception to this rule is AI. So if I'm an AI player and I'm doing something around technology and product, well, it's still differentiated. Everything else is fair game because AI is changing the thing. So if I'm an AI and if I'm doing technology and product oriented differentiation, it will work. But every other category which is infected by AI is going to, find itself being commoditized.
that's most probably because any companies that is very disruptive in technology rapidly gets revolutionized or rapidly evolves into the consumer mindset. Now, if you look at how OpenAI became a sensation, or how Perplexity, Claude AI, they became sensations rather parallelly. It wasn't that OpenAI was already a very big player in the market before Perplexity started spreading its buds. The companies in AI space that are getting acquired are mostly the agentic AI companies that
Yes.
don't make a very big dent in themselves, but are rather, again, the extensions of the products that they are already using, that are already in the market, that are already known, but maybe disrupt the future 2 to 3 years in some way or another.
No, you're right. If I'm an agentic AI company or a product oriented company who is using AI, then I still fall under the trap of being commoditized,
Yeah.
right? So what I have to do is build a story. I was talking just of the infrastructure led companies or the chip makers or the core technology around AI. Those kind of companies, they can still fight amongst technology and product as differentiation. But for the rest of the world, this is a problem. And for D2C, especially when the margins are wafer thin, and when the differentiation is so difficult to establish and prove, and there are seasonal variations and the rest of it, what you need is a very strong community and a very strong story in any case, whether you're going to get acquired or not.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to get acquired, then your story has to be even more nuanced. It has to kind of have the fine balance between being attractive to your potential acquirer and also being differentiated enough from your potential acquirer. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, D2C, any D2C category, if you take, it's a very low intent kind of category. It's an impulsive purchase kind of a category, right? So, and the problem with impulse purchase is, if today I am purchasing a sold store T-shirt, then tomorrow I'm necessarily not going back to sold store. I might just take a U-turn and buy a Crocs, right? So, any D2C community, that company that is looking for acquirers or looking to become very tempting for an acquirer, needs to build a repeat kind of a purchase, which comes through community building and storytelling only, not through your product per
You look
se.
at it from an acquirer's perspective, right? What am I buying? So I'm buying something that I cannot replicate. So which means that I'm buying a story which is going to be something which has been accepted by the target segment and audience. Now I need to understand as an acquirer that if I buy you, am I going to lose all that goodness, right? So if I buy you, am I going to communicate to your community, ye bhi bika hua hai, ye gaye, all of these guys are gone too, and they're not particularly. So that is a danger from an acquirer's perspective. What exactly am I buying, right? Am I buying the land? Am I buying the house on the land, or am I just buying the windows? So that actually makes a big difference. So what the acquirer has to see is that the story will last even if it is acquired,
Yeah.
right? And that is where the secret sauce is. That is where the story needs to be built in such a way that it is so strong that that community will continue even after it is acquired. The weird aspect of this is, so if I have kind of understood that I have to build a story, and this is the kind of story that will differentiate from it cannot be also that different that you come across as a freakoid or as somebody who I cannot do business with. You need to be very careful as to who you're going to be acquired by and not be that distinctive. So it's always it's a very thin line that you have to manage, and also manage it for at least a year or two. You can't just say, oh, I'm doing this and leave it after a while.
So, if you have a D2C company in India or actually anywhere in the world, and you're looking for a successful acquisition, then aligning your strategy with the current market trends and acquirer expectation becomes very crucial. Now, one of the biggest myth busters is, if your product sucks, you're any which ways out. But if your product is great, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're in. So, what do you need for a successful acquisition? You need to build a very strong, differentiated brand story. You should have a compelling brand narrative that clearly communicates your mission, values, and your USP. Acquirers, they look for brands with authentic stories and a strong customer loyalty. The profitability and the ops have to be a top notch. There is no two questions about it. Acquirers, they don't want companies that can't show clear or credible growth story, growth strategy. They do not want business plans from scratch post acquisitions. So D2C brands looking for a successful exit need to be able to communicate their 5-10 year vision and their product's potential to achieve that level of growth. And most importantly, you have to be omni-channel. So Jeremy Horowitz, a D2C investor, has said this verbatim: lack of channel diversity is a major issue that comes up in exits that greatly reduces the valuations. If you don't have multiple marketing channels driving your business, 50% of your revenue comes from one marketing channel, then it's a huge cutoff for any acquirer. So you need to have an omni-channel presence, and you need to focus on retention and community. You build your community first moats through your loyalty programs, through your subscription models. You need to build a very high customer lifetime value and a strong retention metrics. They are the biggest and the most key acquisition drivers.
Thank you, Janavi. Those are wonderful insights. I would add just one insight that I've gotten out of this conversation on D2C brands being acquired, and it just struck me. I think that the biggest thing that a D2C brand should be looking at is understanding what the potential acquirer's story arc is like. Because if I understand what the potential acquirer's story arc is going to be like in, say, 3 years, not just today, I would be able to plan out what my story arc is going to be like, which will kind of be in a situation to differentiate itself, but also kind of connect in some way or the other.